What if the most revolutionary ideas didn't come from some star student, but from a quiet kid who barely even spoke? Today, we're not just going to look at Einstein's famous equations. Nope, we're going to uncover 5 simple but really profound lessons from a man who questioned everything. I mean, everything. Until the universe pretty much had no choice but to give him an answer. So let's just start with a kind of shocking truth. The man whose name is literally synonymous with genius, he was once considered a slow developer. I mean, his own parents were really worried because he didn't even start speaking until he was 4 years old. It's just a crucial reminder that sometimes the seeds of greatness can grow in the most unexpected places. And get this, what if the key to unlocking the whole universe wasn't just about what you know, but something bigger? What if dreaming and wondering and just visualizing the impossible was the real secret? For Einstein, this wasn't just a nice idea. It was the master key to the cosmos. Let's see how he used it. To really get this revolution, we have to go back to the beginning. And I'm not talking about a lab filled with fancy equipment. No, we're going back to the quiet, curious mind of a young boy and one simple moment that sparked a fire in physics. So Albert Einstein was born in Germany way back in 1879, and his childhood just defied all expectations. There were zero signs of this dazzling brilliance. In fact, he was so quiet, so in his own head, that he didn't form full sentences until he was about 4. His parents were genuinely worried. It was like he was living in his own little world. But inside that world, the gears of a universe-changing mind were just starting to turn. The real spark came when he was 5. His father showed him a simple compass. Now, for most kids, that's just a toy, right? But for Albert, it was a miracle. He was completely mesmerized. What was this invisible, untouchable force that was guiding that needle? How did it know? This wasn't just a passing thought. It was the birth of his scientific soul, a question about unseen forces that he would chase for the rest of his life. But that burning curiosity, it quickly slammed right into a wall. The school system of his day, which was super rigid and, honestly, pretty uninspired. This part of his story is all about being a rebel, a misfit, and how that struggle actually forged his unique way of seeing the world. And the conflict was just fundamental. You see, his schools demanded memorization. He just wanted to deeply understand things. They demanded blind obedience. He came back with endless questions. They wanted one single right answer. He brought them a whole universe of imagination. His mind simply wasn't built for a system that punished the very thing that made him brilliant. He was such a misfit that one teacher, totally frustrated, told him right to his face, "You will never amount to anything." Just imagine hearing that. Having an authority figure tell you that your mind, your very way of being, is worthless. For a lot of people, that would be the end of the story. But for Einstein, it was fuel. It just solidified his rebellious belief that his path, the path of curiosity, was the only one worth taking. And this quote, it basically became his anthem. Imagination is more important than knowledge. And his reasoning was actually pretty simple. Knowledge tells you what is, but imagination, well, imagination shows you what could be. It opens up everything, it pushes progress forward, and it's the engine of evolution. It was his personal superpower, the very thing the system had tried to crush. So what happens after this rebellious student finally graduates? Well, he couldn't get a teaching job. So instead, he got a pretty boring gig at a Swiss patent office. It really seemed like a dead end for a brilliant mind. But it was in the quiet hours of this totally ordinary job that he would dream up his most extraordinary ideas. This right here is one of the most famous thought experiments in all of history. As he was looking over patents for new inventions, his mind would just drift, and he'd ask himself this simple, almost childlike question. What would the universe look like if I could ride on a beam of light? What would I actually see? Would time itself start to behave differently? This wasn't some problem from a physics textbook. This was a radical act of imagination, and the answer would lead him straight to his theory of relativity. Then, in 1905, during what scientists now call his miracle year, this 26-year-old patent clerk published 4 papers that completely rewrote the laws of physics. And at the heart of it all was this equation. It's probably the most famous formula in the entire world. And it looks so elegant, almost simple, right? But what it means is universe-shattering. Okay, so what does it actually mean? E is energy, M is mass, the physical stuff things are made of, and C is the speed of light. The formula tells us that mass and energy are really just two different forms of the same thing. They're interchangeable. But here's the kicker. To find out how much energy is locked inside that mass, you multiply it by the speed of light squared. That squared part is the secret sauce. It makes the number astronomically huge, which is why even a tiny speck of mass can be converted into a tremendous, mind-blowing amount of energy. It's the engine that powers our sun. And hey, don't for a second think this is all just abstract theory. His wild ideas about time and space being relative have real, everyday consequences. If you've ever used GPS on your phone, you have used Einstein's relativity. The satellites orbiting Earth are moving so fast that time for them literally ticks a tiny fraction of a second slower than it does for us down here. If GPS systems didn't constantly correct for that tiny difference, your location would be off by several miles every single day. His imagination is, quite literally, helping you find your way.
So, beyond all the physics, what is Einstein's real legacy for us? Well, his journey offers a kind of blueprint for how to learn, how to think, and honestly, how to stay human in a really complex world. We can boil his entire philosophy down into 5 powerful lessons. But before we get to the lessons, just think about this. It's something he said long after he was the most famous scientist on the planet. I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious. Now, that's not just him being humble. That's the master key right there. He didn't see his genius as some gift he was born with, but as the direct result of his unrelenting refusal to stop asking questions. He's telling us that curiosity isn't just something you have. It's a muscle you have to build.
So here they are, the 5 big lessons from his life. 1, stay curious. Just like that little boy with the compass, never ever lose your sense of wonder. 2, think differently. His inability to fit in, that became his greatest asset, so dare to question the way things are. 3, imagination matters. Knowledge has limits, but your imagination is boundless, so use it. 4, don't fear failure. Remember, the man who redefined our universe was once told he'd amount to nothing. Persistence is everything. And finally, number 5, be kind and humble. For all his incredible intellect, he knew that our connection to each other was the most important thing of all. He spent his later years fighting for peace.
So we end right where we began, with a question. We've seen how a quiet, misunderstood kid working a totally normal job used his imagination to redraw the entire map of reality. So, what if the next breakthrough, the next great leap forward for all of us is already inside you, just waiting for a quiet moment, waiting for a little spark of curiosity, and waiting for the courage to ask? What if?